This is our Mundo Voices.
Do you ever think back about when you were 11 years old and all the dreams you had then? Does that look like the life you're living today? If you're like most of us, the answer is probably not exactly, or I'm getting there. But here's the good news. It's okay. In this new episode of our Mundo Voices, we celebrate women's history by inviting two trailblazing leaders to go back in time as they channel the girl inside of them, celebrating this year's campaign, Nuestras Niñas, las Mujeres Imparables del Futuro. This is Ashley G with Internal Comms, and today I'm joined by Erika Boden, Vice President of Business and Legal Affairs, and Alejandra Figueroa, Director of Talent Relations, as they talk about the throwbacks and legacy of my unstoppable journey. Erika, Ale, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored and excited to be here.
Thank you as well. I am looking forward to the conversation.
And we're so excited to have you here. So I'd love to kick off with the most important question of all time. What did you both want to be when you were little and why? Erika, we'll start with you.
Sure. So when I was little, I wanted to actually be a doctor. As a first-generation Filipino American with two parents who were medical technologists and a number of doctors already in the extended family, it had sort of been ingrained in me that becoming a doctor was the ultimate emblem of success. As we'll learn in the conversation later on, that quickly changed.
A doctor. So I totally wasn't expecting that. You went from science to law. That's a whole 180, but nonetheless, dreaming big since day one. Love that. Ale, what about you?
Well, I grew up in Honduras, but I was always very Americanized. I watched TV in English, listened to music in English, books, everything. I think somehow I was destined to come to the US. And then at 16, my dream came true. We moved to Miami, and I actually wanted to study criminal psychology and become an FBI profiler, just like Clarice Starling in Silence of the Lambs. I wanted to work with serial killers. I am fascinated with the psychology and investigating crime from a behavioral aspect, but of course, my mom thought I was insane.
A criminal profiler. That's a bold one. And yeah, I was totally thinking about that. I was about to say, that's the part where your mom totally freaked out, right? That's crazy. Well, anxiety levels aside, a criminal profiler does sound like a pretty cool job for one fearless kid. So I'm loving those fierce vibes. I always like to ask this question because I think it's so incredible how our journeys and our dreams change throughout time. And with that being said, Erika, so you didn't become a doctor, but you did become a successful entertainment lawyer here at Telemundo Enterprises. Can you share with us, how did your dreams change as you grew and who became your biggest ally in reaching new dreams along the way?
Yes. So my dreams first changed during AP biology in high school when I had to dissect a pig and became physically sick throughout the entire process. So that, coupled with my hatred for math, was proof positive that medicine was definitely not the field for me. I had always been a pop culture fanatic, and I always had a passion for music, having discovered my love of singing at the tender age of 3. And I was always singing and performing in school plays, choirs, choruses, and then eventually cover bands. So music had always been a passion of mine. And when I was a senior in high school, trying to figure out what it is that I wanted to do, an aunt of mine, who herself was in law school, recommended that I pursue a career in entertainment law. And that was a field that I had never even heard of until then, never even thought of until then. Because, as a young person, I think about entertainment as the people in front of the camera or, on the record covers or whatever the case may be. And I'm not really thinking about the people behind the scenes who helped to make all of that happen. So it was very eye-opening to have that conversation with my aunt. And it was at that point that I decided as a senior in high school that the career that I would pursue would be a career in entertainment law. And thankfully, I never gave up on that decision and on that pursuit.
Wow, that's awesome. I've always said aunts are the unsung heroes in life. I don't know what I'd do without my aunt. And I want to pause here because I think this topic of allyship is just so important. Building a community around our girls that supports them and uplifts them is key to becoming unstoppable in the future. I was reading an article the other day based on the best-selling book, The Confidence Code for Girls, which, by the way, great read, where it shared that a poll showed that girls lose 30% of their confidence between the ages of 8 and 14 and never get it back. This is huge. It's quite frankly eye-opening, and it's one of the many reasons why we're focusing on the theme of self-esteem for this year's Women's Month campaign, because without self-esteem, we don't get unstoppable women in the future. And that is where we all come in as allies to uplift our younger girls and each other to realize our full potential and follow our dreams as we move along our journey. And speaking of moving along our journey, Ale, while you didn't become a criminal profiler, you did become the right hand to our stars here at Telemundo, which is still a pretty cool job in my book, but shows us that not all roads are a straight shot sometimes. So that being said, how did you end up here at Telemundo?
So yeah, clearly I am not a criminal psychologist, but I must say I still want to do it. You never know. So after that, I decided to major in communications, which was actually my mom's dream. I originally wanted to be on air talent, a news reporter. I went to UF, I did great, graduated, spent the first year after graduation looking for work. But then I decided I actually hated being on camera and I didn't want to be on air talent and I actually wanted to work behind the scenes instead. So I completely changed course and eventually I got an opportunity at Telemundo as an executive assistant to the director of sports at that time. It wasn't the ideal job, but that was my chance to get my foot in the door. And the sports team trained me in production. I volunteered during my free time and I grew from there. Worked as a line producer in an entertainment show, then did the morning show, and it's kind of history from there.
Wow, those were quite a few different roads. And you touched on a very interesting point that caught my attention, Ale, and that was that you actually ended up living your mom's dream, probably unintentionally. And it just goes to show us just how incredibly influential our moms are in the way that our dreams evolve and the direction that our journey takes. But I feel like we're starting to see a bit of a shift in the perspectives from today's parents as we're seeing more women, entering the workforce and more women specifically in non-conventional roles. We're also seeing more parents taking the approach of follow your dreams and, you can do whatever you would like to do. There are no barriers to your dreams. And I think that's a testament to just how far we've come in terms of women empowerment over the past few years. Erika, I want to go back to you now, going a little introspective here, but if you had the chance to travel back in time, what would you tell your 11-year-old self?
Oof. So many things, but I think that above all else, I would tell myself not to be so hard on myself and to give myself more grace. I think I spent a lot of time during my youth and honestly, even through my 30s, trying to live up to other people's standards. And I would tell myself at age 11, looking back, not to do that, to try to live up to my own standards and the standards that I set for myself rather than those that others set for me. Because others, while they have the best of intentions for me, may not be setting the standards that I, in fact, care to own or care to live up to. And I would also tell myself to be more comfortable in my own skin and to own all the good, bad, and ugly parts of myself, because at the end of the day, good, bad, and ugly, that's what makes me me. And that's what makes me unique. And I think that with that advice at age 11, I would have had a lot easier time and being kinder to myself growing up.
Absolutely. I agree with all of that. And I think if there's any other thing I would have told myself at 11 years old, it would have been listen to mom and go play soccer. Fun fact, studies show that 96% of women in C-suite jobs today played a sport in the past, which makes sense when you think about it, because what do you learn in sports? You learn about discipline, you learn about teamwork, how to take risks, how to fail, and most importantly, fail fast. How to build a competitive spirit overall, just key qualities that set you up for leadership in the future. So mental note for all of our parents out there, encourage your girls to take up a sport. And if you're like me and did not listen to mom, there's still hope for us. Meet me at the tennis courts on Saturdays. Ale, I want to pivot back to you now. What advice would you have liked to receive back then that could have helped you in your journey?
Oh, Lord, this was a tough one. That advice would be that you are not a failure if you are over 30, unmarried, and childless. And I would say the importance of work-life balance. Being raised in Honduras, I grew up thinking my purpose was to get married, have kids, and that was it. it was like a sin to be 30 with no husband and no kids. What we would say the ultimate solterona. But after coming to the US, I realized I wanted something different. I wanted the career. My mother was a single mother, a widow. So I focused all that energy into my career and work. Then, of course, time flies. I'm still not married, but I am hopeful. But I finally admitted to myself and to my family, which was difficult, that I did not want kids, and that was okay. It didn't make me less of a woman, which is what I always thought. I learned to deal with it, accept it, and I'm happy. But I can't say that I am the proud dog mom now.
That's awesome, Ale. And thank you for bringing that up, because I think you're absolutely right. I mean, there's so many pressures I feel that come with being a woman and achieving certain milestones by a certain age in your life, whether that's building a family by 30, making the 40 under 40 list, reaching financial freedom by 50. And the reality is that everybody's journey is different, and that's okay. Erika, I want to pivot to you. Can you tell us about a time when you felt unstoppable, even though all odds were against you?
Sure. So I wouldn't necessarily say that this example is one where all odds were against me per se, but it's definitely a time where I was in my own head and was very fearful and had to overcome that fear and just own myself and do the best that I could, and in the end I did. So it was actually an incident that took place at Telemundo. I was asked to speak and represent business and legal affairs at the chairman's open talk back in December of 2019. And this open talk was with our chairman at the time and included on the panel our CFO and our SVP of corporate affairs, some high-level female executives who were colleagues or clients of mine, but with whom I'd never been featured on a panel before. I also had never spoken in front of such a large Telemundo audience before. And so that was very daunting for me. And I had never been asked to talk about my day-to-day work, much less represent business and legal affairs as a department. So I was very nervous. I was very nervous about the prospect of, doing right by my department and making sure that I represented us well, and also not being intimidated by our chairman and by the other amazing executives on stage with me. And I ended up feeling very, very confident in myself right before I was about to hit the stage. I think in part because I was forcing myself to extract sort of the acting side of myself that I had leveraged so much in those, elementary school, middle school, and high school plays and productions that I had been in, and just sort of essentially tried to fake it till I made it. And I made it. I made it through. I didn't fumble on my words at all. I was very poised and confident in myself, confident in the messages that I was sending about our department. And, I ended up actually quite relaxed, just realizing that this was a much bigger deal in my head than it was in real life. And that I just needed to talk about a subject that I knew very well, needed to talk about it in a way that people understood and that resonated with them. And at the end of the day, tried to make my team proud. And judging from the accolades and compliments I received after the talk, I think I accomplished that. So it definitely made me feel really good about who I was that day.
You absolutely did. I remember that day, actually. And I remember thinking Erika did so great. And one of the things that really stuck out to me is you dominated your fear, right? You didn't back down from an opportunity to self-promote or from an opportunity to gain exposure because you were scared of going up on stage. And that's what made you unstoppable. So it's about also putting ourselves in situations where we're able to get out of our comfort zone. Ale, shifting gears a bit, but can you tell us about a time when you became an ally to another woman in her unstoppable journey?
Well, I had a bit of a hard time with this one. And it may be silly, but for most of our talent, as you know, English is not their first language. So there's been a few times when talent have been selected for an upfront campaign with NBC. And of course, they have to do everything in English, interviews, everything. They, of course, freak out. Their first reaction is, there's no way, I can't do this. I can't do this. I'm going to embarrass myself. So I've learned to push through with them, and I've pretty much become their English teacher for that time. We prep the script in Spanish, then we translate it to English, we study it, we run the lines together over and over until, of course, the day comes. I even sent them voice notes so that they could hear, the phrases and practice their pronunciation. And I must say that it made me so proud when I finally would see the campaign on air, and I would see them doing it and see them doing something that they thought they couldn't and they almost turned down.
Absolutely. It's so important to be that person to support somebody to dominate their fears and move forward with an opportunity. And I want to pause here and talk a little bit about mentorship, which is what you basically did without even thinking about it. You guided somebody along their journey. And I also want to take advantage of this moment to surface the term of sponsorship, because I think this is also equally as important, or even more, to be honest. And while mentorship is about guiding and, supporting somebody and offering advice through their journey, sponsorship is about taking that step higher into advocacy, right? Advocating for somebody in the boardroom, whether that's advocating for that woman to get their promotion or to get their, their stretch assignment that they've been asking for, or to convince somebody that somebody is ready for something that they don't think they're ready for. So I wanted to surface that too, because I think those are two key ways that allyship comes to life. And in your case, Ale, it was great to see at the end, after by you just giving these talent English lessons, you help them bring their best selves to the stage. Erika, shifting gears a bit, you're raising two firecracker girls, 5 and 7. What do you and your husband tell your daughters about the world that's waiting for them and how they will manage it?
Yes, my girls are indeed firecrackers at 5 and 7. So I shudder to think about what the teenage years are going to look like. But they keep my husband and me on my toes, to say the least. And we're loving every moment. I think that first and foremost, one thing that my husband and I are constantly drilling into our girls' heads is to believe in themselves. I think that this generation, and I don't know how this happened scientifically or otherwise, but I think that this generation naturally is born with a lot of innate self-confidence that I certainly did not have early on as a young girl. And I'm constantly reminding them that it is important to believe in themselves, even during hard times when they feel that they're not understanding, how to do a math problem correctly, or how to do a lesson in school the right way. That half the battle is believing in themselves and not paying attention to the negative talk in their head that easily can permeate their minds. I think that success nowadays is built largely on believing you can achieve higher and using that self-belief to propel yourself to execute on your goals. And so I really try to drill into their heads that this is a key everyday exercise for them. I also tell them that they need to be more guarded about their trust in people. My older one in particular, much like me, is very social. She's a social butterfly, and I love that about her. And while I think that that's a great thing, and while I think that, and have taught the girls that they should always look for the good in people, I've also really tried to ingrain in them that trust is something that needs to be earned and cannot be freely given. And so with those two things in their arsenal, I think that they will be extremely ready for success in the world today.
Absolutely, Erika. Confidence and safeguarding trust are key to becoming successful in the future. And, they say parenting is one of the toughest management positions a person could ever have. And after being a tutor of kids for 2 years, I totally believe it. So to help some of our parents navigate the many questions they may have around how to best support our girls through their journey, we invite all of our listeners to stream a very insightful conversation on March 17th, centered on the topic of raising unstoppable girls, featuring award-winning journalist, content creator, and CEO of Hispana Global, Jeanette Kaplun, who also happens to be the co-founder of the first parenting site in Spanish, Todo Bebé. Jeanette will be sharing some of her best tips and learnings on how to raise unstoppable girls, so be sure to tune in. All right, Ale, are we ready to go deeper now?
Go for it.
All righty, moment of truth. Do you feel like you were more fearless at 11 years old or now, and how did that shift for you?
Definitely now, when I'm in my 40s. As I've gotten older, like you and Erika have said, I definitely did not have that confidence when I was younger, and it's taken me a while to get there. I've done a lot of soul searching. I've done a lot of internal work, and I'm still working on myself every day because it doesn't stop. And along the way, I've learned that it is okay to speak up. It is okay to be honest and tell people what I think or what I feel, and that I should not be ashamed of whatever that is. I've also learned that no is a very powerful word, used respectfully, of course, but that I don't have to say yes or agree to everything just to please others or be accepted. I've learned along the way that I have to be myself. I have to live my life for me, live my dreams for myself and not anyone else.
Absolutely. I feel like this question could be answered in two totally different ways, depending on who's answering it, honestly. Because some people would argue, well, of course I was much fearless at 11. I didn't know about consequences back at 11. I didn't even think about that. And then you have the exception of the lucky few who were born with the confidence gene and have been confident their whole lives. And then there's the rest of us who have to build that over time. I mean, I remember being painfully shy when I was little, to the point that my mother would have to record me to prove to my teacher that I knew all of my letters because I wouldn't dare to speak in front of a classroom. I was petrified. And 20 years later, here I am in communications, go figure. But it wasn't until later in life when I started hanging out with friends and honestly taking up gigs that took me out of my comfort zone, pushed by my mom, of course, whether that was rolling burritos and, befriending hangry customers at Chipotle or dominating public speaking during my Radio Disney days. These were the things that really brought me out of my shell and helped me bank that confidence, like they say, which is why it's so important to encourage our girls to take risks, to dominate their fears, and even more important, to model that behavior. Erika, I want to shift back to you. As a woman who's in a leadership position at Telemundo, what does success mean for you today?
I think success to me nowadays means being as close to fully present as possible in all that I do, whether it's in meetings or on calls or in drafting agreements and emails or spending time with my family and friends. With everything going on, it can be very difficult, and particularly at Telemundo as a very meeting-centric place, when you're jumping from one meeting to another and therefore one topic to another, it can be difficult to kind of leave behind what you just discussed 5 minutes prior in a completely different meeting and focus on, the meeting that you're currently in. And I think that translates as well into life. But if I'm present or as present as I can be mentally in those moments, then I know that I can be the best version of myself, whether it's by providing legal or business advice that is sound to my clients, or being, a more patient mother, or being a more supportive wife or friend. All of that comes with just having full presence of mind in whatever it is that I'm doing and being at that moment.
Thank you for bringing that up. I do think that's a big one. It's very easy to lose sight of being present, especially when you have like 1,000 devices around you. You're getting pinged from different locations and different people. But it's so important, to your point, to be present in both your personal and professional life, to bring your best self to both. And with that, Ale, I want to pivot back to you. What question do you think your 11-year-old self would have asked you today about your life, and how would you answer it?
Oh, my Lord. The question would be, do I have any regrets, and would I have changed anything? The answer, honestly, is yes. I wish I would have realized the importance of work-life balance earlier in life. I wish I would have believed in myself a little more. I wish I would have done a better job at working hard for both the career and the husband. I wish I would have believed in the fact that, like I said earlier, you can do it all and you can have it all if you just believe in yourself and just go out and do it. And that you don't have to sacrifice one for the other.
Right. I thought very hard and long about this question when I first drafted it. And I think if there's one thing my 11-year-old self would have asked me, it would have been, so what did you end up becoming in life? And did you have boys or girls? Going back to this topic that we kind of surfaced earlier on in the conversation, you're taught to have certain expectations of what to achieve in life by a certain age. And I think if I were to rephrase that question today, it would be a much more important one that I'd hope our girls would be asking themselves tomorrow. And that would be, are you happy? Because that's what it really comes down to. It comes down to living your life with purpose and bringing others up with you with that same glow that makes you shine. So now that we've officially gotten super deep here, I want to end with this last question for both of you. And that is, now with the learnings and experience you have in life, what is your new dream? Erika, we'll start with you.
Whew, we've gone deep today. So
yeah,
I would say that my new dream is to be okay and comfortable with the concept that while I may be able to have it all, at least on paper, I may not be able to have it all at once or at the same time. With everything that I balance day to day at work, and then everything that I balance day to day in my home life, my family life, I'm constantly learning how and when to pump the gas on one versus another. And the guilt is always there. When I sometimes feel like I'm not being, a good enough employee or a good enough attorney. And then on the other hand, I am always feeling like I'm never good enough as a wife or as a friend or as a mother. And it can all be, very draining. But ultimately, if the more comfortable I am with this idea that it can't all happen all at once and that's okay, then in turn, I'm giving myself more grace and I'm able to be more accepting of it all. And ultimately, I hope that the way that I'm managing my career and my home life will serve as a positive example to my two young daughters, whether that means that they learn about what they don't want for themselves or otherwise, in the hopes that ultimately they realize their dreams according to their standards and in a way that makes the most sense for them and in a way that makes them the happiest.
Love that. Ale, what about you?
Well, yes, we have gone deep today. Jesus. But actually, it's going to sound cheesy, but you just said it, Ashley. My new dream is honestly just to be happy. Be happy doing whatever it is that truly makes me feel joy and fulfilled. And to be honestly able to answer that question for myself. Also, I've realized that dreams can definitely change along the way, and that's okay. It's not about the title. It's not about the money. Whether it's being an executive in corporate America or running a doggy daycare, it doesn't matter. I think the definition of success can be very different to each one of us. And in the end, the only approval I need is my own.
Well said. Here's to having grace and being happy. Erika, Ale, thank you both so much for being with us here today and for sharing your unstoppable journey as we continue to celebrate women every day here at Telemundo. For all of our listeners out there, let us know how you're celebrating women's history and what advice you'd give to our women of tomorrow in the comments. Also, be sure to follow the inspiring stories of women from all walks of life on Instagram at Mujeres Imparables. Feliz mes de la mujer y hasta la próxima.
This is our Mundo Voices.